Ukraine's relentless campaign of precision strikes against Russian military bases has become a defining element of this historic conflict, signaling a dramatic shift in the dynamics of modern warfare. Watch the video until the end. Comment on the topic and do not forget to subscribe to the channel. Over the course of 2024, Ukraine has executed more than 40 highly strategic and targeted operations aimed at dismantling critical Russian military infrastructure. These operations have showcased not only Ukraine's tactical brilliance but also its growing mastery of advanced military technology and intelligence capabilities. Among the most impactful of these operations was the audacious attack on Russia's Morozovsk military airbase in the Rostov region, which resulted in the destruction of 6 Russian warplanes. This bold and calculated strike dealt a significant blow to Russia's air capabilities, showcasing Ukraine's ability to penetrate deep into enemy territory and strike at highly fortified and critical assets. Beyond the destruction of material assets, these operations have sent shockwaves through the Russian military command, forcing them to re-evaluate their strategies and defensive postures. Watch the video until the end. Comment on the topic and do not forget to subscribe to the channel. At the core of Ukraine's success lies its innovative use of kamikaze drones and other state-of-the-art technologies, combined with impeccable intelligence coordination. These drones, operated with surgical precision, have become a game-changer, allowing Ukraine to carry out devastating attacks on military facilities located far beyond the immediate conflict zones. From airfields and ammunition depots to command centers, no target seems beyond the reach of Ukraine's determined and resourceful military forces. This relentless strategy is not merely about physical destruction. It also serves as a powerful psychological weapon. Each successful strike undermines Russian morale while bolstering Ukraine's own sense of resilience and determination. The message is clear: Ukraine will not be subdued, and it is prepared to innovate, adapt, and fight back with every tool at its disposal. Watch the video until the end. Comment on the topic and do not forget to subscribe to the channel. As these operations continue to unfold, they are reshaping not only the battlefield but also the broader narrative of the war. Ukraine's actions highlight a remarkable ability to adapt to modern warfare's challenges and opportunities, leveraging technology and strategy to punch well above its weight against a militarily superior adversary. The world watches in awe as Ukraine demonstrates that ingenuity, courage, and resolve can defy the odds and change the course of history. In this new era of warfare, Ukraine has become a symbol of resilience and innovation, proving that even in the face of overwhelming adversity, a nation's spirit and determination can inspire profound change. Every successful strike deep within enemy lines is a testament to Ukraine's unyielding fight for sovereignty and justice, marking a critical juncture in a conflict that continues to shape the global order. Watch the video until the end. Comment on the topic and do not forget to subscribe to the channel. Ukraine has achieved a significant victory over Russia on one of the most critical and contested battlefronts, placing Vladimir Putin in a precarious position with far-reaching consequences. This recent development has sent Moscow into a state of panic as the Kremlin scrambles to determine its next move following a major geopolitical defeat. Putin has been forced to abandon one of Russia's most strategically important strongholds, Syria. This withdrawal signals a dramatic shift in Russia's influence in the region and demonstrates the growing impact of Ukraine's resistance beyond its borders. The collapse of Russia's military presence in Syria marks a pivotal moment in the ongoing conflict. Putin has had to relinquish key military bases and interests in Syria, retreating after suffering tactical setbacks that revealed vulnerabilities in Russia's global reach. These losses underscore how Ukraine's steadfast defense on its home soil has indirectly reshaped the dynamics of distant battlefields. In this analysis, we will uncover the hidden connections, surprising alliances, and strategic maneuvers that have culminated in this dramatic geopolitical shift. We will also explore how Putin's missteps have accelerated a potential resolution to the long and bloody Russo-Ukrainian war. Russia's involvement in Syria dates back to 2015, when it initiated a military intervention to support the regime of President Bashar al-Assad. This intervention was driven by Russia's strategic interests in maintaining its influence in the Middle East and securing its military presence in the region through key facilities such as the naval base in Tartus and the air base in Maimaman. With deep historical ties to Syria dating back to the Soviet era, Moscow had positioned itself as Assad's primary ally, providing multifaceted support. Militarily, Russia's involvement included airstrikes, the deployment of special forces, and the provision of advanced weaponry. Diplomatically, Russia used its veto power in the United Nations Security Council to shield Assad's regime from international sanctions and resolutions while building regional alliances with players like Iran. However, the ongoing war in Ukraine has stretched Russia's military and logistical capabilities to their breaking point, forcing significant shifts in its global strategy. The roots of the Ukraine conflict trace back to 2014, with Russia's annexation of Crimea following the Euromaidan protests and the ousting of Ukraine's pro-Russian president. This move led to widespread international condemnation and sanctions. The situation escalated into a full-scale war in 2022 when Russia launched an invasion of Ukraine, aiming to overthrow its government and reassert control. What Russia anticipated to be a swift and decisive campaign has turned into a prolonged and grueling war, with Ukraine mounting a fierce resistance bolstered by substantial Western support. This prolonged engagement has drained Russia's resources and exposed critical vulnerabilities in its military strategy. Ukraine's resistance has forced Russia to divert vast amounts of resources, including troops, equipment, and logistical support, to the Ukrainian front lines. The sheer scale of these demands has weakened Russia's ability to maintain its commitments in Syria. Logistical challenges, such as transporting supplies over vast distances, have further strained Russia's military apparatus, prioritizing its operations in Ukraine at the expense of other theaters. These constraints have manifested in several ways in Syria. Reduction in air support. Russian airstrikes were a cornerstone of Assad's military strategy, targeting opposition groups and bolstering government forces. However, with much of its air power redirected to Ukraine, Russia has been unable to sustain the same level of aerial operations in Syria. This has allowed opposition groups to regroup and launch successful offensives, leading to the loss of key territories. Redeployment of ground forces. Russian special forces and military advisors previously deployed in Syria have been recalled to reinforce the Ukrainian front lines. With mounting losses, reportedly nearing 700,000 troops, Russia has been forced to reallocate personnel to sustain its efforts in Ukraine, leaving Assad's forces vulnerable on the ground. Erosion of diplomatic influence. The weakening of Russia's military presence has undermined its ability to act as a guarantor of Assad's regime, shifting the balance of power in the Middle East. This loss of influence has emboldened opposition forces and diminished Moscow's standing among its regional allies. These factors have culminated in a dramatic turn of events in Syria. Opposition forces, including the rebel coalition Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, have capitalized on Russia's reduced involvement to launch coordinated offensives, capturing key cities like Aleppo and Damascus. The deposing of Bashar al-Assad's regime signals the collapse of a once formidable alliance and represents a significant blow to Putin's geopolitical ambitions. Ukraine's role in this outcome highlights the interconnectedness of global conflicts. By forcing Russia into a prolonged and resource-intensive war on its own soil, Ukraine has indirectly weakened Moscow's capacity to project power elsewhere. This strategic ripple effect underscores the far-reaching implications of Ukraine's resistance, which continues to reshape the geopolitical landscape. As Ukraine's influence extends beyond its borders, the consequences for Russia are profound. The loss of its stronghold in Syria not only weakens its position in the Middle East but also serves as a stark reminder of the costs of overextension. For Ukraine, this development represents a significant tactical victory and a testament to its resilience and strategic acumen. As the conflict evolves, the world watches closely to see how these shifting dynamics will impact the broader struggle for sovereignty, influence, and stability. Rebel groups in Syria have gained significant ground against the remaining Russian forces, who have been struggling due to a lack of support. The logistical challenges faced by Russian troops in Syria are evident in widespread shortages of essential supplies, including ammunition, food, and proper winter clothing. These deficiencies not only impair combat effectiveness but also severely impact morale. A demoralized and undersupplied army is at a severe disadvantage, especially when pitted against well-organized rebel forces motivated by the pursuit of freedom. This imbalance has allowed rebel groups to quickly gain territory. Another major factor has been the diminishing impact of Russia's naval presence. The Russian Navy, which once played a pivotal role in projecting power in the Mediterranean, has seen its influence wane. The naval base in Tartus, a strategic asset, has been weakened as resources are redirected to the war in Ukraine. Additionally, Ukraine's use of unmanned attack drones has significantly reduced Russia's Black Sea Fleet, sinking about 15 of its pre-war fleet of 36 warships and damaging many others. This loss of naval strength has further limited Putin's ability to support operations in Syria and respond to emerging threats. These setbacks have accelerated the collapse of the Assad regime. Compounding these military challenges is the economic strain caused by the war in Ukraine. Russia's economy has been severely impacted by the costs of the war and over 16,000 sanctions imposed by Western nations. These sanctions target Russian companies and key individuals, taking a tremendous toll on the economy. At the beginning of the year, the Pentagon estimated that Russia's military operations in Ukraine had cost up to $21 billion, including expenditures on equipment, ammunition, and logistics, as well as the economic impact of lost arms sales and sanctions. This figure has likely risen significantly in the months since. The economic impact extends beyond direct military spending. Russia's GDP took a hit in 2022, with losses estimated at $81 billion to $104 billion. The destruction of financial capital, measured by the market value of companies on the Moscow Stock Exchange, reached $322 billion that same year. These economic pressures have hindered Russia's ability to sustain its operations abroad, including its involvement in Syria. The weakening of Russian support has enabled Syrian rebel forces to challenge Assad's regime, disrupting Russia's strategic goals in the region. Ukraine's influence in this situation is significant. By proving to be a greater threat to Moscow and even bringing the fight to Russian soil, Ukraine has forced Russia to narrow its focus, effectively abandoning Syria. The tangible military and economic impacts are paralleled by an intangible but critical loss: Russia's diminished diplomatic clout in Syria. Since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, Russia has concentrated its diplomatic efforts on the conflict with Ukraine, neglecting its role in Syrian peace talks. For years, Russia was a key ally of Bashar al-Assad, using its influence to broker peace talks and assert itself as a major player in the Syrian conflict. However, this focus has shifted dramatically. Russia's reduced involvement in recent Syrian peace efforts has created a vacuum, allowing other players, such as the United States and European nations, to step in. This fragmentation has made the peace process more complex and opened opportunities for rebel groups like Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, to capitalize on the chaos. The diminished Russian presence in Syria has emboldened the rebels, who, along with their backers, have taken advantage of the situation. HTS rebels have made significant territorial gains, deposing Assad's regime in key areas, while Russia has been unable to respond effectively due to its preoccupation with Ukraine. While much of Ukraine's influence in Syria can be described as indirect, its direct involvement with rebel groups further illustrates its strategic approach. Ukraine has formed alliances with certain Syrian rebel factions, including jihadist groups, to undermine Russian efforts. Ukrainian military advisors have provided critical training to Syrian rebels, sharing tactics and strategies that have been effective in resisting Russian forces. This training has exposed weaknesses in Russian military operations and equipped the rebels with new tools for their fight. One notable area of training has been drone warfare. Ukrainian advisors introduced Syrian rebels to the use of drones, particularly first-person view (FPV) drones, also known as kamikaze drones. Ukraine sent 150 FPV drones and 20 drone operators to assist HTS rebels. These drones have proven highly effective in disrupting Russian operations, showcasing how Ukraine's innovative tactics have been adapted to distant battlefields. Through these combined efforts, Ukraine has successfully eroded Russia's power in Syria. The reduced logistical support, economic constraints, and shifting focus have left Russian forces and their Syrian allies vulnerable. As rebel groups gain momentum, the collapse of the Assad regime signifies a major blow to Putin's geopolitical ambitions, all while highlighting Ukraine's growing influence on the global stage. The collapse of the Assad regime has significantly weakened Russia's military and diplomatic influence in Syria. With Assad's fall, key regions like Homs have been lost, severing the regime forces' connections to coastal strongholds. This has complicated the defense of Russian military bases in Tartus and Maymim. Ukrainian intelligence and coordination with Syrian rebels played a critical role in enabling these developments. By providing tactical support and strategic insights, Ukraine facilitated successful rebel offensives. Russia's bases in Tartus and Maymim are vital for its strategic presence in the Mediterranean and the Middle East. The naval facility in Tartus supports Russian military operations in the Mediterranean, while the Maymim airbase coordinates air operations across Syria. However, the collapse of Assad's regime has exposed these installations to increased attacks from rebel groups, including mortar and drone strikes. Satellite images have shown Russian forces dismantling equipment and withdrawing from Maymim, indicating heightened insecurity. Protecting these bases has become a significant challenge for Russia. While efforts continue, the concurrent strain of the war in Ukraine has limited Russia's ability to respond effectively. Ukraine's resistance has successfully stretched Russian military resources across multiple fronts. The fall of the Assad regime has created a power vacuum in Syria, with various regional and international actors vying for influence. Turkey has increased its activity in northern Syria, while Iran faces diminished power projection in the region. Gulf states like Saudi Arabia and the UAE are recalibrating their diplomatic strategies to navigate the new landscape. Russia, meanwhile, has been forced to negotiate with the new Syrian government and other regional powers to maintain its military presence. Diplomatic engagements with Turkey, Iran, and Gulf states are part of its efforts to secure its interests in Syria. However, these efforts are hindered by Russia's declining influence and the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Ukraine's actions have further undermined Russia's position. By drawing Russian resources away from Syria, Ukraine has indirectly contributed to the weakening of Russia's foothold in the region. This strategic maneuver has forced Russia to divert attention and assets, reducing its effectiveness in both Syria and Ukraine. Ultimately, the collapse of Assad's regime and the challenges faced by Russia in maintaining its presence in Syria highlight the broader implications of Ukraine's resistance. The weakening of Russian influence in Syria serves as a significant tactical victory for Ukraine, showcasing its ability to challenge Russian power on multiple fronts. Ukraine's involvement in Syria has highlighted its willingness to pursue unconventional tactics in its broader struggle against Russia. By working with certain jihadist groups, Ukraine has strategically undermined Russian influence and bolstered Syrian rebels' efforts against the Assad regime. Ukrainian military advisors played a pivotal role by sharing combat strategies and tactics developed during their own conflict with Russian forces. This included exposing weaknesses in Russian methods and enhancing the operational effectiveness of Syrian rebel groups. One of the most impactful contributions from Ukraine was in drone warfare. Ukrainian advisors introduced Syrian rebels to advanced drone technology, particularly first-person view kamikaze drones, and even sent 150 drones along with 20 operators to assist the rebels. These drones allowed for precise strikes against critical infrastructure and military targets, significantly weakening Assad's forces. The Ukrainian advisors also taught the rebels how to manufacture and repair drones, ensuring long-term sustainability of this capability. This technological edge proved decisive, enabling rebels to achieve swift and decisive victories. Beyond drones, Ukraine provided substantial amounts of ammunition and weaponry, equipping entire battalions and allowing the rebels to sustain their offensives. This steady supply of arms not only ensured prolonged resistance but also boosted morale, as the rebels felt supported by a nation experienced in resisting Russian aggression. The psychological advantage was significant, fostering a belief among rebels that victory was attainable. Ukraine's strategy extended beyond aiding the rebels. It aimed to strain Russia on multiple fronts. By encouraging fierce resistance in Syria, Ukraine forced Russia to divide its resources between the conflicts in Ukraine and Syria. This dual-front challenge weakened Russia's ability to maintain its influence in Syria, ultimately contributing to Assad's fall. With Assad fleeing to Moscow, it became evident that Ukraine's plan had succeeded. The downfall of Assad's regime has jeopardized Russia's military foothold in Syria, particularly its key installations in Tartus and Maymim. These bases were critical to Russia's strategic presence in the Middle East and Mediterranean. However, the loss of Assad's regime has exposed these installations to increased attacks, forcing Russia to divert resources to protect them while simultaneously engaging in Ukraine. Ukraine's strategy also targeted Russia's private military companies, PMCs, especially the Wagner Group, which had been instrumental in supporting Assad's regime. Wagner's operatives had provided combat support, logistical assistance, and training for Syrian forces. However, the escalation of the conflict in Ukraine forced Russia to redeploy Wagner personnel, weakening their presence in Syria. The death of Wagner leader Yevgeny Prigozhin in 2023 further destabilized the group, diminishing its operational effectiveness and compounding Russia's challenges. The collapse of Assad's regime and the subsequent fallout for Russia illustrate the culmination of years of conflict and strategic interventions. Key moments, such as the fall of Aleppo in late 2024, highlighted the rapid unraveling of Assad's control. Syrian rebels, empowered by Ukrainian support, managed to dismantle the regime's strongholds and undermine Russian-backed efforts. The downfall of Assad and the weakening of Russian influence in Syria represent a significant geopolitical shift. Ukraine's involvement not only disrupted Russia's operations in the Middle East but also demonstrated the effectiveness of its broader strategy. By forcing Russia to overextend its resources, Ukraine has achieved a tactical victory that extends beyond its own borders, reshaping power dynamics in the region.